Hey guys, it's Matt. I finished John Keel's Mothman Prophecies book, and although it is an endless account of UFO testimony, phenomena, things that happened to a farmer's ranch in 1975 in West Virginia, or discs flying over a highway in a bright light, and only a small part is about Mothman sightings, that weird thing with wings that flies up in the air. That's only about 10%. What interests me, that stuff doesn't interest me. And most people here, it doesn't really interest you. What interests me is when John Keel starts to dabble in understanding reality itself as explanations for what's happening. Now, there is no final grand conclusion in John Keel's book, Mothman Prophecies, about reality itself. And by the way, the movie is not the same as the book. I don't even think John Keel was pleased with Richard Gere running around in that movie. So forget the movie. What I'm saying is John Keel has gone out for, over a decade, interviewed 1,000 people. And this farmer says, here's what happened on my ranch. And this person says, here's what happened on the highway one night when I saw these two lights and one landed. Endless interviews. And John Keel is saying, and he dabbles in this, he does not go as far as we would like him to go. We can't be upset at him because he was a trendsetter in even dabbling into reality like this in 1975. He has no conclusions, but he's basically saying, all these people I'm interviewing, they're not lying and they're not crazy. This person, there really was a gigantic disc craft, and it's not just like lights in the air. I mean, they have contacts with aliens standing right in front of them. He's saying these people are not lying, maybe one or two out of hundreds. He knows when people are lying. They're not crazy. They're not lying. Well, John, if I was there with John Keel, I'd say, John, does that mean they really had an encounter with an alien and a flying saucer from another galaxy? He would say no. That's the point here. Something else is going on. Something in the fundamental baseline nature of reality itself. And we would say, well, John, what is going on? He dabbles in it. It's almost like he's afraid to go there. I don't want to use the word afraid. This guy is a trendsetter compared to us. He only beat us by 30-some years. So, but he doesn't have access to what we have access to today. And if he did, boy, I think it would be incredible, some of the things he could put together for us. Again, one last time, endless interviews, accounts, sightings, etc. John Keel would say, this person sitting on this porch here, they're not crazy. It really happened to them, but it's not what they think happened. It wasn't a real alien. And I know somebody's listening, it's going, well, Matt, there's only a few explanations, Matt. Either they really did have an encounter, the ship did land and an alien came out and it was real, or the person's crazy, or they're lying. It's not just three possibilities. And John Keel doesn't quite know how to go here. I don't quite know how to go here. He's kind of saying, and he doesn't get into this in long paragraphs like we would like him to, but he dabbles in it because he doesn't know how to present it. And most readers, you could ask a UFO investigator, somebody that just likes the UFO stuff, say, did you read Mothman Prophecies? Oh yeah, I read it 5 years ago, somebody may say. Tell me about what John Keel was saying about the nature of reality itself causing all this phenomenon, all these testimonies. They won't even really know what you're talking about. It's so subtle the way he talks about it because he doesn't really know how to talk about it. I don't either. But we're so far ahead of what the information he had access to at the time. And the person that read the Mothman Prophecies, that's a big UFO person 5 years ago, would say, no, this is just John Keel's accounts of all the people he talked to and all the strange phenomenon. We try to talk about the fundamental governing dynamics of reality itself. The UFO researcher, they don't even know what we're talking about. It's so subtle in this book. So I'm going to read these passages, and it's just fascinating. 1975, all these accounts in West Virginia. And at some point, just to summarize, if you don't want to stick with it, 20 minutes of me reading, and this is going to be a long time, the main purpose of me making this video is right here. At some point, John Keel comes to the conclusion, and he doesn't even say this, it's just subtle, picking it up a sentence here, a sentence there, and Magda sent me some stuff from another book, just pulling a quote here or pulling a quote there. He's saying, these people are telling the truth. You would say, John, do you think they're crazy? No, I don't. He would say, no, I don't think they're crazy. I think they're telling the truth. Then, John, they were really visited by little aliens that came out of the ship that landed on their farm. That really happened to them, right, John? He would say. Now, at the time he interviewed them, maybe when he first started doing the investigations, he would say, yeah, there's no other explanation. But as he's gone through like thousands of these, if you asked him, he's passed away. If you ask him now, if he was still with us, or if you asked him when he started to write the book, putting all the testimony and investigations and interviews together, he would say, no. Like, okay, there was something standing in front of them. They thought it was an alien, but was it really something from that galaxy or something that flew in? Or he would say no. And, well, John, what is it? He goes, he would say, I don't know. Something relating to reality itself, he would say, and put his hands up. Something we don't understand. But it's not as simple as saying they can be believed or not being believed. It really happened, yet it didn't happen in the way they say, or it's not what they think. I know that makes no sense. John doesn't know how to explain it. We certainly understand the basic or the general conversation here. You're Mandela affected, reality breakdowns every day, people on the ship of fools sailing into a reality that is completely foreign to us. We experience this now every day. If John was with us, we'd say, John, what you experienced, imagine it being 1,000 times more on steroids. That's what's going on in 2022. Okay, that's the best I can do in terms of the summary and the gist of what is very subtly coming out of Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies. I'm going to read many passages. This could take 15 or 20 minutes. This is not a 1.25 exercise. It's for somebody that really wants to read between the lines, ponder what John, he himself doesn't even know how to say it or what he's trying to say. And I forget these passages. I did underline them as I read the book as being significant and important. Maybe there will be pieces that I had forgotten about that we could use to form a back-end conclusion. This will take a while. And, you 1.25 bathroom boy, skip this. This is for somebody who wants to sit back, put their feet up, ponder the big questions, and not get over to the old man in the chair. Okay, first I'm just going to give you a sample encounter or a sample interview. And this just happens over page after page of the same sort of things. So here's an example. The stranger, this is somebody giving information in an interview that John is taking. The stranger was about 5 feet 10 inches tall with long dark hair combed straight back. His skin was heavily tanned. Grinning broadly, his arms crossed and his hands tucked under his armpits. He walked to the panel truck. He was wearing a dark topcoat. Underneath it, Woody could see some kind of garment made of glistening greenish material, almost metallic in appearance. I guess Woody's being interviewed. Do not be afraid. The grinning man did not speak aloud. Woody sensed the words. We mean you no harm. I come from a country much less powerful than yours. He asked for Woody's name. Woody told him his name. My name is Cold. I sleep, breathe, and bleed even as you do. Mr. Cold nodded toward the lights of Parksburg in the distance and asked what kind of place it was. Woody tried to explain it was the center of a business center and homes in a city. Cole explained such places in his place were called gatherings. While this telepathic conversation was taking place, the chimney-shaped object ascended and hovered some 40 or 50 feet over the road. Other cars came along the road and passed them. Okay, this goes on and on and on, page after page after page. These are the types of UFO encounters that I'm talking about as a sample. Early on in the book, John Keel writes, as we progress, you will see that many seemingly straightforward accounts of monster sightings and UFO landings can be explained by irritatingly complex medical and psychological theories. In some cases, the theories will seem more unbelievable than the original events. Please bear in mind that the summaries published here are backed by years of study and experience. I am no longer particularly interested in the manifestations of the phenomenon. I'm pursuing the source of the phenomenon itself. To do this, I've objectively divorced myself from all the popular frames of reference. I'm not concerned with beliefs, but with the cosmic mechanism which has generated and perpetuated those beliefs. Now, John doesn't, this is early on in the book, first few pages. He has no conclusion addressing what it seems like he'll be addressing here. He doesn't go there at all. The key here is I am no longer particularly interested in the manifestations of the phenomenon. I am pursuing the source of the phenomenon itself. He's basically saying all these 1,000 interviews I did, somebody said, my alien I saw was green, my alien was this, my alien was tall. He believes all these people. He's saying after all these interviews, I'm not interested in that anymore. They all told a real account of what happened to them. He's saying, I'm not concerned with beliefs, but with the cosmic mechanism which has generated and perpetuated those beliefs. Cosmic mechanism. What we say, reality itself, the underlying governing dynamics of how reality works, the metaphysical phenomenon that we're so interested in. Because all we've been through, all I've been through, all you've been through in terms of, quote, reality junkie research over the last 10 years, when John hints at this, we sense exactly what he's trying to say. And we're like, John, if you could only see and know what we know at this point. We see what you're trying to say, but he just doesn't go there. He doesn't know how to go there. But again, one last time, if you ask some UFO researcher, all they do is UFOs. You know, there's a lot of people that are so into basically just the UFO phenomenon. And they've all read this book or they all own it. And you say to somebody that is a UFO researcher, hey, did you read Mothman Prophecies? Of course, man, I read Mothman Prophecies. When? 10 years ago I read it. And well, tell me what John was trying to say about the nature of reality itself. They won't even know what you're talking about. Again, they'll be like, what you talking about? What you talking about, Willis? He was trying to say something. All they will remember is the testimony about Uncle Dave got out of the damn Sanford & Son truck and the damn disc came down, little man came out. All they'll remember is account by account. They won't know what the hell we're talking about in terms of, do you remember reading anything John was trying to say about the nature of reality itself? Continuing to read a few pages later, about 10% of the population have the ability to see above and beyond the narrow spectrum of visible light. They can see radiations and even objects invisible to the rest of us. A very large part of the UFO lore is, in fact, based upon the observations of such people. What seems normal to them seems abnormal, even ridiculous, to the rest of us. People who see ghosts or the wandering shadow have these abilities. They are peering at forms that are always there, always present around us, like radio waves, and when certain conditions exist, they can see those things. The Tibetans believe that advanced human minds can manipulate these invisible energies into visible forms called tulpas, Tulpas, or thought projections, or Matt will add egregors. John subtly makes note that most of his UFO investigations, at least during the time period where he constructed the Mothman Prophecies book, was a certain valley, Ohio River Valley in West Virginia, I believe he said it was. And he does kind of conclude very subtly that it's something about the area itself where one UFO sighting will create another. People will expect to see a Mothman, and then it'll feed on itself. And again, John gives no conclusions, but he's saying there's a reason that this certain area is known for this type of sighting. Or maybe he would say, I'm just putting words in his mouth, this part of New Jersey, Pine Barrens, might be famous for the sightings of the New Jersey Devil, for example. And he doesn't put the pieces together like we're trying to do here. But it's like, yeah, John, what you just talked about, egregors, basically we're going to just take his tulpa words out. We'll translate into something we understand. Thought forms, egregors. If there's one or two people that cite something in this West Virginia Valley and the word gets out and you have 1,000 people in the area thinking on it, then it's the phenomenon is almost created like an egregor. John doesn't go here. It would be fascinating, if he was still with us, all the pieces we'd be able to put together with him. This is also very much related to what we've been saying for a long time. No reality could do that. I think John he'd see what we see now. You go investigating hardcore UFO phenomenon, guess what the reality is going to give you eventually? It's going to give you UFO phenomenon right up in your face. Does that mean a real alien came down? No. It's a characteristic of reality itself. Jeff, who does the hardcore job application 2001 research right now. He goes digging into something else. Guess what the reality is going to show him? Yeah, no real world could do this. I don't think John Keel had any understanding as we do because of the benefits we have in terms of what research we have available to us, how fluid the reality is. If somebody that really knew the concept of egregores could explain this to John, he would say this just bridged a gigantic gap in my research if John fully understood what the term thought form entity or thought form demon or egregore was all about. Continuing to read a few pages later, the flying saucer entities have allegedly contacted many people in almost every country and have immodestly claimed credit for everything from the building of the pyramids to the sinking of Atlantis. Continuing, the unidentified flying objects that have been present here since the dawn of man is an undeniable fact. They're not only described repeatedly in the Bible, but were also the subject of cave paintings made thousands of years before the Bible was even written. And a strange procession of weird entities and frightening creatures have been with us just as long. When you review the ancient references, you're obliged to conclude that the presence of these objects and beings is a normal condition for this planet. These things, these other intelligences, or OINTs, as Ivan Sanderson labeled them, either reside here but somehow remain concealed, he says from us, or concealed from most of us, or they do not exist at all, these things, and are actually special aberrations of the human mind, tulpas, hallucinations, psychological constructs, momentary materializations of energy from that dimension beyond the reach of our senses and even beyond the reaches of our scientific instruments. And John, this is the new term that we discuss, egregore. So continuing to apply whatever our knowledge base is in 2022 to what John started out to do in 1975, all right, maybe there are more than three possibilities. A giant disc flew over the highway and landed down right in front of me as John's taking this interview. And again, remember, there were only three possibilities, right? Either a giant disc really flew over and landed right in front and somebody got out, or a little green thing got out. Two, the person's crazy, or they're lying and making it up. But there's another possibility that somehow a thought form created something in right outside the dimension of sensory perception, a tulpa, he calls it, or an egregore. So to that person, there really was something standing in front of him or her. Whether that thing or whatever that thought form thing could be seen or identified by another person is open to debate. But again, at least in this part of the debate, if you ask John Keel, and I'm he's dead. It's really bad for me to speak for him, but I'm trying to interpret. I think he would want his work carried forward and interpreted using our modern, quote, modern understanding. He would say, that alien, was that really an alien that flew in from the backside of Saturn? He would be like, no, it's more a manifestation of reality itself. He'd be more apt to believe it's an egregore of some kind than a real alien that came down in a real ship. Even though the people that have these accounts, it's not like, again, a far-off light. They might have even touched the alien. They might have even touched the ship. I don't think that would matter to John. Just because they touched it, that means it really had to be steel? No. Why? Okay, I guess I can't do much more without giving you a Mothman account. So here's a Mothman account. At 7:15 a.m. on November 25th, a young shoe salesman named Thomas Uri, U-R-Y, was driving along Route 62. He noticed a tall, gray, man-like figure standing in a field by the road. He says, suddenly it spread a pair of wings and took off straight up like a helicopter. It veered over my convertible and began going in circles, 3 telephone poles high. He stepped on the gas as the creature zoomed down over his vehicle. It kept flying right over my car, even though I was doing about 75. Mr. Uri sped to Point Pleasant, that is West Virginia, and went straight to the sheriff's office, thoroughly panicked. I never saw anything like it, he confided to Mrs. Hyde later. I was so scared I just couldn't go to work that day. The thing had a wingspan every bit of 10 feet. Back to Matt talking. I can hear many of you right now from your bathtubs say, Matt, that ain't nothing but a government project. You saw those James Bond movies when he flies up with a jetpack? And, you even said yourself, Matt, that they have, technology 50, 100 years in advance. And okay, I don't think so, okay? First off, only 10% of this book is about Mothman accounts. The other 90%, all manners of strange UFO phenomenon, including craft landing in front of cars, people and aliens getting out of the craft. That's mostly what the book is about. But there's all types of different Mothman accounts. Yeah, it does seem like the jetpack from James Bond. And just there, Matt, they sent that government project into West Virginia to fuck with people. Okay, first off, like I said, 90% are a variety of different types of encounters. If you want to explain away Mothman, I guess you can, but it's not just the same type of account. Many people saw were transfixed or hypnotized by the red eyes, were much closer to it, saw it on the ground before it flew up, as if you saw something that was 40 feet away standing in a field with gigantic glowing red eyes. Is that a government agent standing behind the bushes? If it just did the same thing over and over again, flew around with fixed wings, and many accounts do say it had fixed wings and doesn't flap. Some accounts might say it flap, but I think most say fixed wing. That certainly seems like it's a government fuck job. I hear you, but again, this is mostly the book called Mothman Prophecies is not about the Mothman. Another part of this book is about the Men in Black. I don't have a particular passage marked here, so I'll just have to summarize it. People would have these accounts, or maybe before John Keel would get there to do the interview, and many would say, like, let me just summarize it. This Men in Black would show up. And it wasn't like it looked like a normal government car or, like it was definitely the FBI or the CIA or there's something like the cars were always these cars 30 years out of place or 40 years old, but they were completely brand new with not a scratch. And the Men in Black type people that would get out, like they have weird mannerisms or smelled funny, like they were aliens themselves, the people that came to do follow-up research. It's just a weird part of the book. And once again, if John, I don't mean to put words in his mouth, but I think if he was here still alive with us, he would say, look, I've talked to enough people where these strange Men in Black showed up and they all said the same weird, strange things. Unless the government, every single time they go to screw with somebody to investigate a UFO sighting, and every single time they're also screwing with people with strange smells, weird mannerisms, cars that park on the street and then disappear. Unless that's all part, and the government, what's the government getting out of all this? They're just having fun? I mean, at some point, John Keel would say these pedestrian explanations, like a big part of even the truth community likes to do, they don't work anymore. The government's screwing with people in the same way, and it's always every single explanation is coming from this little box between the bookends. John would say, I don't know what's going on, even with this Men in Black, but it ain't as simple as just whatever fits in your little reality bookends. I think John Keel would like my descriptor of, quote, reality bookends. This part is a little off topic, but very interesting, related to things and videos we've been watching in the truth community for 10 years, so let me just read it and we'll talk about it. Even more interesting is the fact that the messages received by psychics everywhere bear remarkable similarities in content, even in phrasing. I've researched obscure contactee-type books written 200 or 300 years ago and have found the same identical messages and phraseology were prevalent then. Since much of the literature is very obscure and hard to find, and since many of our psychics and contactees are poorly read, it is doubtful if this is a question of fakers repeating the earlier material. Rather, it seems as if there is a phonograph in the sky endlessly repeating the same material generation after generation, as if there were a crack in the record. Basically saying psychics are people that have certain perceptions, century after century almost. They get the same messages, like there's a phonograph in the sky that only certain people can hear, but it never changes its message. Let me continue. Author Brad Steiger interviewed scores of psychics, prophets, and contactees for his study of this phenomenon. Revelation, the Divine Fire, I guess his book was called. He found that people claiming to be in communication with God, angels, spirits of the dead, and spacemen from other planets were all receiving essentially the same information. All spoke of an impending disaster, just as Zandark warned, quote, the time for, this must be an interview a few pages back, quote, the time for your planet is crucial, but the prophets and seers of the last century were getting the same spiel, the same end of the world spiel. Have we ever witnessed this before in the truth community? You betcha. William Miller, 1782-1849, founded the Seventh-day Adventist in the belief that the world was coming to an end in 1843. Interestingly, prophets all over the world and tribes of Hopi and Navajo Indians in the Southwest picked the same year. Clearly, they were all tuned into the same static, or I'll put in message. Jehovah's Witnesses were founded in 1872 on a similar premise. The messages delivered to the children in Fatima, Portugal, in 1917 also discussed the coming disaster, but phrased in obscure theological terms. That's Portugal is a big deal in the truth community. Fatima, Portugal, where people kept seeing the phenomenon, and then the phenomenon predicted or said when it would come back, and supposedly thousands of people came out at this part of Portugal when the phenomenon was predicted to come back, and it came back, and those thousands of people saw it or heard it or whatever was presented in Portugal. This is well documented. Is everybody there? Did they see something, or are they paid and threatened for a government hoax that apparently has no reason? I guess they just get off on. No, they likely saw something. But again, John is saying very subtly throughout this book, what they think they saw is not what they saw. There's something going on with reality that the citees, is that even a word, they don't understand. Okay? Again and again, psychics and contactees have gathered their family and friends together to sit on a hilltop and wait for the predicted end of the world. This charade has been repeated many times in the past 25 years with UFO contactees preparing for the wonderful space people to descend in their flying saucers and evacuate a chosen few from the doomed planet. The world was supposed to end on December 24th, 1967. Occult and UFO groups around the world got the message in every language. A Danish cult actually built a lead-lined bomb shelter and spent the holiday cringing in it, waiting for the big blast. Okay, this goes on and on. More accounts of the end of the world. Okay, this part's relevant. First, the aliens convince us, or those in contact with them, of their honesty, reliability, and accuracy of their predictions about the end of the world, and their well-meant intentions. Then they leave us sitting on a hilltop waiting for the world to blow up. What John is saying here, how many people in the truth community using messages and gematria or all sorts of things, reading between the lines, they'll predict the end of the world. That's not what John's saying here. He's saying there are countless accounts, literally, of a spacecraft landing. An alien gets out, completely real to the person that's having the encounter, convinces them they're honest, reliable, might share something about history, and says the end of the world's coming, say, next Wednesday or whenever. It's not like they're getting messages or dreams. These people, at least the examples that John may cite in this book or through his vast experience, these are real aliens that literally came over, patted someone in the ass and say the world's going to end. It's not like some weird vague message. They're convincing the person they're in contact with of honesty, reliability, and accuracy of their predictions. Of course, big thing to remember, John's saying going back hundreds and hundreds of years, it's all working the same way. These stories repeat themselves, and guess what? The world has never ended. So what were these things people were in contact with? Were they real aliens flying in from Orc, or were they more Egregors or something else in this reality that we don't understand? Continuing to read, when the world was sparsely populated and the signals from the superspectrum were not smothered in so much static from the lower spectrum, men learned to place great faith in these entities and their prophecies. Priests, scholars, and magicians achieved a marvelous understanding of the cosmos and the cosmic forces through astrology, through alchemy, and the magical manipulation of matter. As a man followed the angelic dictate, quote, multiply and replenish the earth, our planet began to suffer from psychic pollution. The record on that great phonograph in the sky cracked and stuck in a single groove. Single groove, repeat, broken record. The messages, John's saying, coming from the sky that people are interpreting in whatever way, whether they're interpreting it through the Gematria or hidden messages in movies, or an alien popped out of a craft and said the end of the world's next week. It's the same message and over. It never happens. That's why recently people have come to me, end of the world, end of the world, end of the world. What have I said for years? It ain't going to happen. It's part of the reality trick. Don't we know this by now? Now, this part of the Mothman Prophecies book is very similar to what we've been talking about for years. If you go and announce that you're researching it, it will show you what you want to look for, what you want to find. It'll give you the breadcrumbs. Same old thing. No real world could do that. There's some place in Pennsylvania, an hour or two from here, called Hawk Mountain with a bunch of rocks, and you're up there way high up. I've never been there. Pam hikes up there. If I set my intention now that, and I say, I'm not really saying this to the universe, hey universe, don't take this the wrong way. I'm not saying this is an example. Okay, an example. Even with examples, we have to be careful. The universe just popped its head up and said, oh, what does he want? What does he want? What breadcrumbs can I lay down for him today? I'm going to go, this is an example, universe. Go back to sleep. Hawk Mountain, I'm going to make a pilgrimage there. I'm going to fast a few days before. And then I want the universe to tell me when the end of the world is coming, and I'm focusing on this. I'm focusing on nothing else. I'm fasting. I finally get up to Hawk Mountain. Incredibly, there's no tourists. There's no little kid going, Mommy, 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 I want a pretzel. I want a soft pretzel. You're just up there by yourself, and the hawks are flying around. And again, to reality or to the universe, this is an example. I'm not really asking for this. Then I scream out in a kumbaya moment on the top of Hawk Mountain. I want to be shown the prophecies. I want to see the end times. Does anybody doubt that then as you go back and start doing all the research, does anybody here, after all we've been through, doubt that reality will show it to you? Of course it will show it to you. Here we go. No real world could do this. And if anybody's saying, Matt, you're never saying the most important part, that it's not the world doing this. The world is the mirror. It's a reflection of our own consciousness. The world isn't then just playing tricks like it's some sentient thing. It's a reflection. If you expect to get prophecy about end times, expect to meet Mork from Ork, it will give you the breadcrumbs, and it'll give you what you need to satisfy you during this chase, during your investigation. It's not natural, and I believe John Keel would agree that a similar phenomenon works for those that expect to see aliens or expect to have a paranormal phenomenon of some kind. It will deliver, probably with the energy, whatever the phenomenon, the energy is probably created from the generator being that has the phenomenon. The person's creating it themselves. The reality reflects it back, and they think it came from Mork when it came from their broke dumbasses. And just coincidentally, the pause on what I just said as I had stopped recording, I'm saying the reality reflects back or literally creates or brings into manifestation what the person expects to find. That last pause was 33 colon or 0.03. I said coincidence, but when the Gematria shows itself like that, it's not a coincidence at all. And stop saying these are the numbers of the Freemasons. We need to run from them. When I check myself into a high-rise hotel, I say, don't put me on floor 33. No, you should actually ask for 33. No, if the reality wants you to do a certain thing, then you know what it really means? You do the opposite. Seek out and use the power numbers and the Gematria for yourself. They don't own it. This is the next key section that I highlighted. There seems to be a rule that each cosmic force has its imitators. Victims of UFO contact are often suffering from false illumination. Either their minds have misinterpreted the experience or a lower force has reprogrammed them using the same mechanism. In a sense, they have become possessed. They suffer from hallucinations, repeated hallucinations. Their lives are manipulated disastrously. Once a person has undergone false illumination, he becomes vulnerable to repetitions. Just as once a person has been hypnotized, he can be easily hypnotized again. The phenomenon is dependent on belief. And as more and more people believe in flying saucers from other planets, the lower force can manipulate more people through false illumination. I've been watching with great consternation the worldwide spread of the USO belief and its accompanying disease. If it continues unchecked, we may face at a time when universal acceptance of the fictitious space people will lead us to a modern faith in extraterrestrials that will enable them to interfere overtly in our affairs, just as the ancient gods dwelling on mountaintops directly ruled large segments of the population in the Orient, Greece, Rome, Africa, and South America. It's Matt back again. Stop talking about yourself in third person. John does this over and over in this book. Wow, listen to that. Ancient gods dwelling on mountaintops directly ruled large segments of the population in the Orient, Greece, Rome, Africa. What does that mean, John? And it's right at the end of page 193. You go to turn the page. Oh, is he going to explain this? No, just completely goes off into another topic, basically. Doesn't explain it at all. He can't explain it. We have far more to work with than he did or does. So we're trying to explain his stuff here. So let's go back to the key section. The phenomenon is dependent on belief. Identical. The phenomenon is dependent on belief. He's already touched on what he called tulpas, which are egregors. As more and more people believe in flying saucers from other planets, the lower force can manipulate more people through false illumination. I don't know what he means by this lower force. It might be related to what we've talked about it with really lame terms, but you know what I mean. Reality generation machine was my first grade explanation that something's not quite right here. What John's saying here, the phenomenon is dependent on belief. Reality generation machine. The universe will show you the breadcrumbs of what you expect to find. Somebody that goes into a bang event and tries to break it down and understand it like everything is just between the bookends. And Matt, don't you know what those Freemasons can accomplish? And everybody's paid and threatened. And you're all the way down that left side of the sliding scale. You're ignoring every major lesson that we've learned and that John started to talk about in this book from the 70s, ignoring every major lesson. No, Matt, don't you understand when people are paid and threatened, they'll do as they're told. That's not how reality works, dude. How about this that I read a little higher up in the paragraph? Once a person has undergone false illumination, he or she becomes vulnerable to repetitions. Just as once a person has been hypnotized, he can easily be hypnotized again. Uh-oh, this has ramifications for our truth community. Why, Matt? Because you repeat yourself constantly? Maybe, but that's not what I'm talking about. I don't think that's what he's talking about. Once we've gone through a false illumination, let's just play it out here. I'm doing this on the fly. I might get a lot of this wrong. Once a person has undergone false illumination, he becomes or she more vulnerable to repetitions. Just as somebody that's hypnotized can be easily hypnotized again. So let's just play this out. Did we, according to John, potentially undergo a false illumination when we woke up? Was that what the 2001 job application was for? Oh, we're awake. We can see all this stuff that our neighbor can't, that the guy down the cul-de-sac and Aunt Ginny can't. But according to John, then we become vulnerable to repetitions. We become vulnerable to potentially chasing the breadcrumbs that it wants us to chase, Tartaria, that it wants us to chase, shape of earth, that it wants us to chase mud flood, and there's 40,000 other things? So he's calling it a false illumination. I don't really like those terms. I think what he means is, okay, we have a certain illumination. The 2001 job application didn't go down as they say. Oh, as we look into this is false. Everything we look in is a false presentation of history. But then if we're not careful, once we create the circumstance or the situation ourselves, we then can be led in vulnerable to repetitions is the way he puts it, vulnerable to repetitions. Interesting, he used hypnotized. If you've been hypnotized once, you can be hypnotized again. Anybody that doesn't, let's just put it this way, if I'm interpreting what John may be saying here, and then does he continue to expand on it? No, because he didn't have the information we have now. It's our goal or our job to expand on it. Somebody that thinks that True Value and Ace box cutters did the job application with the box. If they see it the way Anderson Cooper tells them to see it, are they ever going to see all these other things? Are they ever going to want to investigate Tartaria or mud? No, they're not going to, because they don't have any illumination. That's worse. He calls it false. It's really not false. I think it means then you become subject to all of its real nasty reality tricks once you become or reach a certain level of frequency. That's a big part of this channel, to get the people that have become what John here says illumination, or can see things that the guy down the cul-de-sac can't see, it knows you. It's Santa Claus. It sees you when you're sleeping. It sees you when you've woken up to the 2001 job application, and not to take the more hardcore pipe-hitting bait that the reality will throw at somebody that has a certain level of perception, as we do. It's all part of the reality trick. John Keel, the phenomenon is dependent on belief. What more needs to be said? From chapter 14. Like all other things discussed here, this is not a new phenomenon. Black magicians, witch doctors, and shamans of other ages evolved explanations as fanciful as those of modern UFO buffs. It's basically relating that these themes, we have a modern theme of a spacecraft, but the theme goes back in other forms, back through thousands of years, he's saying. Back through hundreds of thousands of years, they thought spirits kidnapped humans and somehow dismantled their bodies and reconstructed the bodies, even created an exact duplicate in some fashion. The changeling concept in religious and occult lore is a variation of this. Small children are supposedly whisked away and substituted with bodies that look just like them, but are really programmed in an entirely different way. A person who consorted with the devil supposedly had a mark somewhere on his flesh as a souvenir of the experience. A modern UFO contactee develops these devil marks, sometimes in the form of a wart or boil, sometimes a rash or blotch that looks like a birthmark. In occult lore, pains in the stomach or solar plexus occur during the experience, just as UFO contactee Mrs. Barry thought blah, blah, blah. So, identical. What's happening to the UFO contactee is exactly what happened to people that had similar paraphernalia, paranormal phenomenon in the distant past, except one has a different prop. See, it's the year 2000 and something, or 19 something. They use things they can understand in a context they can understand. Like I saw Buck Rogers, or I saw this 2001, what is it, a Space Odyssey, or I saw Close Encounters. So the experiences now involve a spaceman, where John's saying the experience 400 years ago was the same damn thing, but it didn't involve a spaceman because there was no context for spaceman. But whatever reality is doing, the same thing is going on. It's a repeating script, just with different stupid props. Continuing to read, nothing in the paranormal world is as it seems. It is, of course, really impossible to tell what is actually going on from these meager clues. The memory of the contactee is unreliable. The phenomenon deliberately sets up false trails. He's speaking of it like it's almost an entity. The phenomenon deliberately sets up false trails. That's like yellow breadcrumbs. And creates manifestations designed to support the beliefs of false frames of reference. Creates manifestations designed to support one's own belief set. Have we ever talked about that before? But John, I think you'll find, if you were alive today in 2022, that the whole driver of it, the whole energy of it, is from the person themselves, not that there's anything going on behind the scenes, or at least if there is manipulation behind the scenes. This is Matt talking. The energy to do it, the energy to pull it off, the spark plug, is the person's own conscious, creative awareness. Continuing to read, by drawing blood conspicuously from a few people who let their stories be known, they establish an explanation for the thousands of dead animals who have their blood drained. So John is acknowledging there is no phenomenon in and of itself. It is very similar to if a tree falls in the woods and no one is around to hear it, doesn't make a sound. If it certainly seems he doesn't think the people are lying. A real craft came down from their perspective. A real alien got out and said, "Hey, I'm Bob." And that really happened to the person. But if that person was not there, John would clearly say there was no tree falling in the woods to make a sound. There is no spacecraft without the person being there. That doesn't mean it's as simple as saying, well, it's all made up in the person's mind then. It's an illusion. No, it could be, at least from this reality snow globe perspective, it could be very real from how reality manifests here. But its engine, in my opinion, its spark, what drives it is the power of the person's own consciousness as a generator being. So if you want to carry this example forth, there is no tree. It's back to the old quantum stuff. So there is no tree that falls anywhere without the person being there to experience it. John doesn't mention the word quantum one time in this book, yet these are similar themes. Here's part of another documented encounter that's relevant to the next section. Quote, "We've been waiting for you," he told me. "Record in your memory what we're going to tell you." They gave me a message to send to the governors and the responsible of the earth. In this message, there was the reprimanding or warning to all those responsible to stop the atomic explosions, as well as to grant humanity the well-being of true progress, but with justice and freedom and love and fraternity this time. Following this meeting, we had several conversations during other meetings. I was told that they're part of an intergalactic confederation. They are the tutors of humankind, including our planet. We should consider them as thus like big brothers who are concerned about the bad turn we have taken. Okay, skipping ahead, these messages that these friendly alien councils bring to us, it says, instead of telling us things we do not know, they tell us things we want to hear and we want to desperately believe. Our fear of nuclear annihilation was epidemic in the 50s and the 60s, so many of the UFO messages of that period were stern warnings about our misuse of atomic energy. As our own paranoia subsided, so did the threats and the messages, the friendly messages from outer space. Again, one last time, I'm sorry I have to speak for John. I think he would agree, and I think I've interpreted his work fairly. If he was still with us, say, John, does the person sitting here, are they crazy? No, they're not crazy. Do they really believe they had an encounter? Yes, they do. They're not faking it or not working for the PSYOP government. They really had an encounter. Did they really have an encounter with something? Were they on drugs? No, he would say, Matt, they really had an encounter of some kind. Let me repeat that. John would say they really had, Willie had an encounter of some kind where they touched the alien, not just some light way up in the sky, like right there in their face, getting up in their business. Say, John, how does this happen? John would say, I don't know. That's kind of the point of my speculation here, you son of a beach. I don't know how, and that's up to you guys at 2022, 50 years in advance to get this shit done. John would say, I don't know. I'm just pointing this shit out so you can build off the back of my work. How many times in our truth investigations have we heard the Space Council or people that are going to help or friendly aliens are intervening or benign assistance? John would say, well, these people aren't lying. There's something going on, but it's a repeating theme. It's something that we can only understand if we have a full understanding of reality itself, and it's bogus. Sorry. You know, this one's going to be different from all the other repeating themes that have been going on thousands and thousands of years, people saying the same thing, the same messages, the same end of the world prophecies, the same stories about how the aliens are going to help. Well, but this one's different today. No, it's not. Sorry. Continuing to read. In many cases outlined here, I've pointed out the entity's obsession with time. Their behavior, as described by various witnesses, further suggests their problems in adjusting to our time frame. Again, one last time. Does John think they're real entities coming from another planet? No. It could be an egregor. It's a manifestation of reality itself. Okay, last time said, sorry. For example, the entity's rapid-fire, unintelligible language, noted by witnesses all over the world as sounding like speeded-up phonograph record. It could be caused by their failure. He's calling them their failure, like now he's flip-flopped back to like they are real entities. Okay, last time. They need to adjust to our time cycle when they enter our space-time continuum. They are talking at a faster rate because their time is different from ours. When they manage to adjust, they have to forcibly slow themselves down, articulate their words slowly in a sing-song manner, For high-speed radio transmissions, we record signals at normal speed, then broadcast the tape at a very high speed. The receiver records it at the high speed and then slows the tape down again so it can be played back. Our entities are like those radio receivers, playing back the messages at slow speed until they hit upon a speed that we, regular, quote, human beings in this earth, can interpret. The entities also foul up in other ways. They arrive in clothes that are out of style or not yet in style. Their vehicles are out of date. If they use slang, they might come up with an archaic term like 23 skidoo or hubba hubba. The poor bastards not only fail to understand who or what they are, but also where they are or what time period they're in. Some of these mistakes seem intentional and have some allegorical purpose, but others seem to be just mistakes. Page 247. A contactee may feel a sudden impulse to go for a pointless late-night walk or drive. During that drive, he encounters, he thinks, the space people and has a fine visit with them. Actually, his body proceeds on to, say, point A, where he picks up a letter or an object left there by another contactee. He carries the letter or object to point B and deposits it. Later, he has no memory of these actions. Meanwhile, some poor slob with the wrong aura, like myself, receives a phone call advising him to proceed to point B, where he will find something left for him by the space people. In short, all physical evidence and manifestations are produced by human beings. In short, identical. All physical evidence and manifestations are produced by human beings. They dig holes in fields, rifle mailboxes, and who knows what else. These games have been going on since ever. Skipping ahead. These letters and other letters like them help to convince me that my own investigations into the UFO paranormal could be manipulated. I was being led to people and cases to support whatever theory I was working on. Repeat, I was being led to people and to cases to support whatever theory I was working on at the time. I tested this by inventing some rather outlandish ideas. Within days, I would receive phone calls, reports, and mail describing elements of those ideas. Again, Matt, stopping here and pausing, this is very similar to the Hawk Mountain thing I presented earlier. Climb to the top of Hawk Mountain and declare to the reality this is what you're going to investigate. Don't lie to the reality, then literally go investigate it as if it's your passion, and it will feed you yellow breadcrumbs. This is exactly what John Keel is saying here. It would give him cases and people to support whatever theory he was working on. Incredible. I give you credit, John. We thought we were onto something. He hit on this in 1975. Skipping down a bit, my thoroughness led to the discovery of coincidences that seemed significant at the time. Two of my silent contactees shared the same birth date, September 6th. As soon as I realized this, circumstances added several new contactees to my stable, all women and all born, I'll give you two guesses, but you're only going to need one, September 6th. This is the Gematria, guys, that flows through the reality and is somehow created by means and mechanisms we don't understand. First grade truthers. Oh, they're planting the Gematria and the license plates. That's from that scene in Sling Blade. Those man that contemplates doing away with license plates. They're not planting the Gematria. Okay, we know that's not how reality works with little people and men in black running around. Okay, it's not just the secret societies. We know we're starting to get an idea of how reality works. Matt, you're always making excuses for the secret societies. You must be working for one of those secret societies. Remember what John said. It is human hands carrying the letter from point A to point B. Somehow John is told to investigate point B. The contactee takes the letter from point A to point B. They have no memory. They don't really know what they're doing. This system or screen uses its minions. It doesn't stop and start at the secret societies. Maybe they are an element of what we're talking, or they probably are an element. But to focus just on that And the Omega House, thank you, sir, may I have another. It's beyond that. Okay, we know this now. Page 253. Near Mount Misery, I picked out a motel at random, I thought. The motel clerk asked to see my identification, which is very unusual. "We've got a lot of messages for you here, sir, Mr. Keel," she said, pulling out a sheath of message slips. I started to protest since I had not even known I was going to stay at that motel until minutes before I drove into the damn parking lot. The messages were all nonsensical, meant only to prove once more that my movements were being anticipated before I even knew. Page 264, John's contact with some sort of weird alien entity. It became apparent he did not know who or what he was. He was a prisoner of our time frame. He often confused the past with the future. I gathered that he and all his fellow entities found themselves transported backward and forward in time involuntarily, playing out their little games because they were programmed to do so, living or existing only so long as they could feed off the energy and minds of mediums and contactees. Talking about Loosh before anybody else was talking about Loosh. Good job again, John. I could ask this entity, John says, any kind of obscure question and receive an instant and accurate answer. Perhaps my own mind was being tapped, just like my telephone. "Where was my mother's father born?" The entity answered. "Cameron Mills, New York, of course." "Where had I misplaced my stopwatch?" "Look in the shoebox in the upper right-hand corner of the bedroom closet." He goes and looks. It was there. Skipping ahead a bit, a surprising number of contactees were orphans, and through them the whole hybrid concept was launched, the hybrid concept. They were told that their parents were a cross between terrestrial and extraterrestrials, that slowly more and more earthly women were being impregnated by spacemen, and eventually the whole planet would be populated with a hybrid race. Some of the games I was involved in were obviously designed to convince me of the reality of this crossbreeding experiment, but I knew it was just an updated version of the biblical begattling theme when the sons of God went into the daughters of men, and he's referencing here the Nephilim. He's just saying these same themes repeat over and over and over again. John's saying, here, continuing, I noted that as soon as my attitude changed towards the game, I read that wrong. I noted that as soon as my attitude toward a game changed, the entities switched to a new game. My pregnant contactees and the whole hybrid thing suddenly became unpregnant. So again, the only thing to take away here, if there's nothing else we remember, is the real person, the conscious being, the real spirited being, John himself, you and I, is essential and necessary in all of this. None of it can take place without us. It's the spark plug, but it's beyond the spark plug. Towards the end now, where John Keel is attempting to summarize certain things, again, the summary that we would want is not there because he himself didn't understand and did not have access to the things that we do. It says here, I can only admit, like Socrates said, that the more I learn, the less I know. The more I learn, the less I know. First off, it's from Socrates or Aristotle or Hippocrates. I pay really close attention to it. Why, Matt? Because those people were so smart? No, I don't even believe those people were real because I believe it's a Humpty Dumpty saying that needs to be artificially carried through time. The reality needs to present the truth in different or roundabout ways to real people when they finally get a sense or ready to leave the game behind. I don't believe these people were even real. But maybe they were. How do I know? It doesn't matter either way. If they were real, I don't think it's just because they were so smart. They maybe did come up with these things, and then reality had to carry it artificially through time, like Humpty Dumpty and all the other lessons for real spirits to learn that just can't go away. Because if you look hard enough, the real answers are always here amongst all this noise. So most people would agree that a saying as profound as the more I learn, the less I know, most people here would agree with that. I'm sorry to speak for you, but you would say that is like a Humpty Dumpty. That's one of these massive statements about the human condition, whatever that means. It just seemed like a good thing to say at the time, but you know what I mean. Yeah, like a Humpty Dumpty, things that have to be carried artificially through time. So if you assume that that's right, and that we see that these major sayings, and even a lot of the quotes from the founding fathers, that's a little weird to me. Like, oh, how convenient that these perfect quotes came out of this group of people. That's me. That's like old Mother Hubbard sat in a cupboard or tubbard or whatever. That's all the same thing to me. It's all these messages carried even through Brothers Grimm tales and fairy tales. If these messages are profound, let's apply them. The more I investigate and learn, the less I know. So does that mean one should spend 500 hours over the next 10 years investigating mud flood? Let's apply it. The more I learn about this false breadcrumb that the reality lays down, the less overall I know. I think that phrase means it would be a waste investigating 500 hours of mud flood. Let's try to apply it again. The more I learn, the less I know. The more I learn about the Tartarian Empire and what exactly happened and what exactly was covered up, but Socrates would say that's the less overall I know. Probably not just about how the reality itself works, but about your own self. See, I'll go with the Socrates statement that I think contractually has to be carried through time artificially for real people versus I'm going to go spend 18,000 lifetimes on a mud flood. You see, what happened to John Keel in these endless investigations over 10 years, when he first started, he was excited. This person's completely real and legitimate. They really saw that alien. If I put him on a lie detector, he'd pass. He's credible. His friends say he's credible. That must have been so fascinating for John. I'm really talking to a person that met an alien or that really saw the Mothman. Then the next person he interviewed, this person saw an alien and he was excited. Then after it's the same through the bog process that we go through. John and us with us, it's the same. It's the same. At some point, John says, this is no way this is possible. Maybe he said things like, no real world could do this. He went through that same process. And after the 10,000th one, and to us, it's not the 10,000th contactee or alien story. For us, it's the 10,000th or 100,000th coincidence, an impossible event that was pulled off and a perfect cover-up. Then John's right now, I think he died in 2001, I believe. I should check that. I think the afterword here is from 2001. He's starting to get to take his hot air balloon up and he say, wait a second, there's something going on here that's just completely outside of what John would say my reality bookends. And he didn't get to the bottom of it. He died and he said, John, what is going on? He would say, I don't know, but it's not what it seems. And the process is so fascinating that John went through that we have gone through to step out of the bog. He was stepping out of his bog, but his bog was more specific. It was interviewing UFOs and abductees and people that have seen aliens and seen the Mothman and all that stuff, very specific. Yet the process, ours is much broader. It's a wide range of conspiracies, but it all leads to the same place. And we share that place with John Keel. The middle of page 296. Once we begin looking beyond the mere manifestations, we will finally glimpse the real truth. Look beyond the mere manifestations. To me, mud flood is a manifestation of reality. Tartaria is a manifestation. That's where I think the whole truth community gets it wrong. They see it as like an end in of itself. No, it's a manifestation. Take your hot air balloon up a lot higher. Look beyond the manifestations, John Keel says. Identical. Belief, he says, has always been the enemy of truth. Belief, he says, has always been the enemy of truth. Yet ironically, if our minds are supple enough, belief can sometimes open the door. After spending a lifetime in Egyptian tombs, among the crumbling temples of India, and in the lamasseries of the Himalayan Yaz. Endless nights in cemeteries, gravel pits, hilltops, everywhere, all over the place. I've seen much, and my childish sense of wonder remains unshaken. But Charles Fort's question always haunts me. If there is a universal mind, must it be sane? That is the end of the book. So to summarize, it was fascinating some of the insights that John Keel came up with simply because of the time period. Taking notes in the mid-'70s, I mean, without access to the internet. I mean, truly remarkable, some of the things he came up with. And there was one takeaway from this whole presentation, it was that these things, he called them manifestations, without really being able to describe what was going on. Well, how exactly is this working through reality? Or we don't know. He doesn't know. But I would think, using the word manifestations, I think almost everything we've put hardcore research into is a manifestation. And as you get closer to it, here we go again with that same, if we could pick one sentence from all our efforts, as you get closer to conspiracy, put your face right up against it, you get farther from truth. It's a reality trick to suck you in. Tales of chemicals is a manifestation. Well, Matt, we need to research that. We need to know exactly where the canisters are coming from and where the planes are landing. It's a manifestation of reality itself. We'll never, ever understand it. Matt, don't you know it's bromium, rhodium, aluminum? That's why you got the bad taste that's in that mouth, you son of a beach. No, it's not because I have the bad taste in my mouth. It's not. I don't buy those same parroted themes in the truth community. If it's bromium, strontium, aluminum, tumium, and all the other metals, then that implies a real plane is taken off somewhere and a real plane's landing somewhere, because aren't they dropping metals? I don't buy it. It's a manifestation, as John Keel suggested. Just like all of these people that really saw, quote, really saw an alien. Well, what does that mean, Matt, regarding tales of chemicals? I don't know what it means. But it means I'm not, per the Socrates, I'm not supposed to get closer to it. I'm not supposed to investigate it anymore. It sucks me in. Mud flood's a manifestation. Tartaria is a manifestation. All I care to know, all I need to know by my heel is not to get closer to it. And know that a further investigation ain't going to yield shit, but it's a reality trick. The C itself, right now, not the SCA, but, the CV, it might be a manifestation. It might be no different if you back up far enough from tales of chemicals. It might be no different if you back up far enough from mud flood. Or, well, this affects real people. It's a manifestation. I don't truly understand what that means. I like when, as John quoted it, this is the best way to think about our reality investigations. And if you take nothing else away from this presentation, I am highly convinced if there's a topic that interests you and you try to get close to it, where there's going to be a winner and a loser, or you can cross a finish line by researching a topic, then you're playing into exactly the trick that the overall general arching master reality wants to fool a real spirit with. What a coincidence. The same themes repeat over and over and over again. It's the bog. John Keel's endless UFO investigation, he saw it. It's just another form of the bog. It ain't no different. His bog is a similar bog to Tartaria and all the other stuff that I get on in terms of the truth community. We all have to go through it. This is just another example of why we should turn and walk away from it. Thanks for listening.